So good afternoon, everyone. I'm Sandra Arevalo here with another edition of Community Chats at Montefiore Nyack. I'm the Director of Community Health and Wellness. And today we're going to be talking about emotional eating, especially for children, and how emotional eating affects children, especially during this epidemic that we have with childhood obesity. And we know that obesity has some other consequences like diabetes, high blood pressure, none of that. We want to make sure that our children are kept safe and healthy. So today with us, we have Lisa Pincus. And Lisa, I'm just going to let you introduce yourself.
Sure. I just want to confirm this is the introduction to mindfulness topic.
Yes,
so
absolutely.
Not as much focused on eating. It's more generally about mindfulness. Does that sound okay to you?
Go ahead. Yes.
Okay, wonderful. And I think that these
and let us clarify, because you're going to be with us again. So this is a very extensive topic, and Lisa is going to be doing 2 sessions for us. So that's why we're talking about that.
Exactly. And I think that a lot of the skills that I introduced today can certainly be applied to eating and a whole host of mental health concerns. And so I hope that, this will sort of lay the foundation for other talks that you may attend in the future. So is it good with you if I introduce myself?
Go ahead.
Okay, great. So hi, everyone. My name is Dr. Liza Pincus, and I am an attending psychologist and the clinical director of the Adolescent Dialectical Behavior Therapy Program at the Montefiore Moses Child Outpatient Psychiatry Division. Quite a long title, I know. But essentially my job is to work with children, teens, and families who are experiencing a whole host of mental health concerns, family conflict, and other high-risk behaviors that especially teens may be experiencing. And through dialectical behavior therapy, which is a therapy that is specifically designed to deal with these sort of high-risk concerns, and by the way, eating is something that often comes up in our clinic. The sort of foundation of the treatment is this word mindfulness. And so today I'm going to be introducing you to kind of what mindfulness means, at least according to this treatment, what it doesn't mean, because I think there's a lot of misconception, particularly as it's become more kind of ingrained in our society. And then I'm going to be going through a few basic skills that you can hopefully teach at home to your children.
So let's start there. Mindfulness. You just said it. Mindfulness is kind of a new word. I don't think that 30 years ago we were using that term.
Yes.
However, in our vocabulary is being used more and more. And again, like people just use it. I hear my 18-year-old talking about mindfulness all the time, and I'm always wondering, like, does she even know what mindfulness is? So let's start there, clarifying what it is. And I love what you said, what it is not.
Yes. It's so funny that you say that now a lot of children in school are learning the term mindfulness, because exactly, certainly when I was in school, we were not being taught, and I both love it. And I also think it's important to know what we're actually talking about. So essentially mindfulness is a very simple definition: being in the present moment, or sometimes I like to call it being here now. So how often are you kind of in the shower? This is the example I love to give: in the shower in the morning, but you're not really in the shower, right? You might be using soap, washing your hair, but in your mind, you are already in the car on the way to work, thinking about the traffic, thinking about that meeting you have coming up, right? Instead of standing in the shower, smelling the soap, right? Putting the shampoo and running it through your hair, feeling all the sensations, feeling the water on your back, right? How often are you actually in the shower when you're in the shower?
Don't ask me, because my shower is my thinking place. So I never know what I'm doing in the shower other than thinking about my day
Right.
Or, in the evening thinking about how my day was.
Well, exactly. Thinking about your day coming up or thinking about how your day was. Now, let me ask you this. Let's say something happened at work that day that wasn't so great, right? Maybe you had a tough meeting and you're sort of in your mind going over and over that thing. Why did I say that, right? Why couldn't I have said this other thing? Do I think that person's mad at me? Do I think I did something wrong? It's called ruminating in the psychology world, right? That process of just sort of going over something again and again and again. Let me ask you this. How does that make you feel? Good or bad?
Bad.
Bad. There's actually some pretty cool research that shows that when we, in our minds, go over and over and over the thing that happened that day that's upsetting or whatever, our bodies feel as if we are in the moment again where that bad thing happened. So basically, now we're experiencing the bad thing twice, or maybe 3 times, or maybe 4 times, or maybe 5 times, depending on how much we think about it, right? And so really what we're doing is extending the suffering of that bad thing that happened. Similarly, when you're in the shower at the beginning of the day and you're thinking about, oh, I have that stressful meeting coming up, or, oh, what if there's a lot of traffic on my commute? Same thing, you're making your body feel as if you are in that traffic. So you're basically increasing your suffering more than it has to be present. And that's really the point of mindfulness, is to acknowledge, you know what, life is hard enough, right? We have those moments of pain. We have those bad meetings. We have those trafficy commutes, and obviously more serious topics as well, certainly. And so all we're doing by spending our time kind of reminiscing about how bad that moment was, or worrying about how bad that future moment might be, all we're doing is increasing our suffering more than we have to. And so the point of mindfulness is to bring us back to the present moment, because the present moment is all we have control over. And let me go into some additional benefits of mindfulness if no one has further questions about that.
Well, I do, Liza. Like,
yeah,
usually what you're saying happens, I think, all the time, at least to me. And please, to our participants, if you feel similarly, please write down in the Q&A or the chat, agree or not agree. But what's interesting to me, usually we reminisce, as you say, in negative feelings, or stressful feelings, or, as you say, suffering. We don't usually go about, oh my God, that lunch was so great today, and I tasted 10 times more in my mouth.
exactly.
Why is that?
Yeah, it's such a good question. I know, I'm sure so many people can relate to that. It's like, why don't we remember the good, right? We sort of only remember the bad. Yeah, I mean, I think probably the most straightforward answer to that, according to research, is that we're sort of hardwired to do that. Our brains kind of naturally go to those bad memories as opposed to the good memories. And I think it's because in the early times, right, in the earliest form of humans, there were a lot of serious dangers around all the time, right? Animals, different things that we sort of had to hide from. Of course, there are new dangers now, but they've changed, right? So sort of in like prehistoric times, we had to really interpret our emotions like fear or sadness or different things like that as real danger. And so our brains are sort of trained, throughout the course of our evolution as humans, to really focus on those experiences, because once upon a time they kept us safe. But now that can kind of get us into trouble, right? When we focus so much on that, because it actually just, as I said, increases our suffering.
Yeah, so it went from a survival skill to
exactly.
a killer, really.
Exactly. Right.
Okay. So let me rephrase a little. So mindfulness is about living the moment.
Right.
Or
Living
in the moment, living in the moment, right?
living in this one moment because it's all we have, right? So maybe we'll do a little exercise right now, and then we can talk about some additional benefits of mindfulness. So I'm going to try to lead us all through a little game or exercise that I like to do with the teens and children that I teach this to. So this would be a great one if you're looking to bring something home. It's called 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And it focuses on our 5 senses, because our 5 senses are the only thing we have to kind of ground us, put us in this present moment, as opposed to letting our minds kind of get the better of us and run wild, right? So here's what we're going to do. We're going to focus on 5 things we see in this moment, 4 things we hear in this moment, 3 things we can feel with our hands in this moment, 2 things we can smell, and 1 thing we can taste. Okay? So what I want everyone to do is look around the room that you're in, wherever you are right now, and see 5 things. And you can first observe what it is and then kind of describe it to yourself. So for example, I'm going to look up and I see a blue binder. And then I see a yellow door. Okay. So let's do 5 things we see and just sort of note it to yourself. Okay. Now you may want to close your eyes for this one if it's easier to focus on your senses in this way. 4 different things that you hear in this one moment. Okay. Now I want you to use your hands to kind of touch whatever it is around you, a desk, a pillow, a keyboard, whatever. So 3 things that you feel, and really feel it and try to describe the feeling. Okay. Now 2 things that you smell at this particular moment. Okay, now this next one may be hard if you haven't eaten in a while, and you never know. 1 thing you taste. Okay. So let me ask you this. Couple questions. First of all, did you notice things in the room around you in this moment that you hadn't noticed before?
So I invite people to really write the answers. I don't want to be the only one. But something I noticed that I didn't notice before is how much black I have around me. Like everything is black. I'm like, oh my God, everything is black.
That's so funny.
Yeah, that got my attention. I'm like, I was trying to look for something more colorful because I was like, oh my God, everything I'm looking at is black.
Yep.
What about other people? I don't know if somebody wants to write in the chat what they noticed.
Yeah, you can talk about what you noticed. You can talk about, was one of the senses more challenging, to notice than others? Like, I know for me, it's very easy to observe what I see. It's a little harder to observe what I smell, and to describe what I smell, because I don't think we have as much language for smells as we do for objects that we see. So really any observations?
Yeah, I think the smell is hard. It's like,
Yeah,
because there are a lot of things that don't have a smell also, it's like
right.
I had a tangerine here, so I opened it to
Uh-huh.
be able to
Ooh.
smell it because I just went like this. It didn't smell like
Uh-huh.
anything until I opened it.
That's good for this exercise. Yeah, yeah. Okay, and then I mean, I guess the most important question, because that's really the purpose of this exercise, did you find that when you did this, you were thinking about anything else? Were you thinking about that stressful meeting you have coming up? Were you thinking about, you know, that upsetting thing that you wish you hadn't said yesterday? Or were you really focused on this moment?
I was really focused on my task.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Any other reactions?
People are quiet today.
I know it's because it's so rainy, probably. It's a little hard to get the energy up, but hopefully you've all been doing this at home and seeing that, yeah, it's really hard to kind of be focusing too much on the past or the future when you're really practicing being mindful in this one moment. Good. It definitely helps.
And
That's great.
and well, we have one comment finally. Kudos to Cassandra who dared to say something to us. So
Uh-huh.
she said, yeah, it definitely helps.
Great. And I'm going to share my screen for a moment and go over some additional benefits of mindfulness, because I think it can be a little confusing. I remember when I first, this is back to kind of what mindfulness is not. I remember when I first heard the word mindfulness, I thought it had something to do with religion. I thought you had to be in a quiet space, like meditating with candles. I didn't really understand. Because I think, yes, meditation is can be mindfulness. And obviously, yes, being in a religious space can promote mindfulness, but it's not just that. Mindfulness can really be anything where you're focusing on the present moment. So for example, I'll have a lot of people that I work with focus on mindfully washing the dishes, right? Mindfully taking out the garbage, mindfully eating their lunch, right? So with eating, you can think about, what do I see? What's there on my plate? Let me smell it, right? Let me really take the time to smell it. Let me take a bite, really taste what it is in my mouth, right? Really focus on the thing that you're doing and nothing else. So I'm going to introduce that as well. So let's talk about some additional benefits. Can you see my screen? Okay. And this is from, by the way, the Adolescent Dialectical Behavior Therapy workbook that we would use in a DBT skills group. So we talked about number 2, reduce your emotional suffering, and increase your pleasure and sense of well-being, right? How many times have you been walking down the street and you're in some beautiful area, maybe it's springtime, the trees are blooming, right? The flowers are smelling really good, and you're not even noticing because you're so focused on, your cell phone and answering text messages, or maybe even just thinking about that horrible thing that happened that day, right? So we're really kind of missing the beauty of the world if we're not actually present in the moment. Or, right, how many times has it been a Sunday night and we are so miserable about having to go to work the next day that we totally miss a quarter of the weekend because we're so miserable thinking about work the next day, right? Whereas instead, we could try to enjoy that Sunday night while it's still going on, right? And then, of course, really, at least in the way that I practice mindfulness with children and teenagers and families, is that being mindful helps us have more control over our behaviors, right? So it's so easy to just kind of act impulsively, especially when we're feeling emotional and we feel really, really angry. And so we just yell, right? Mindfulness helps us notice, okay, what's going on in my body right now? I'm feeling my muscles tighten up. I'm feeling my heart start to race. I'm noticing the urge to yell. But okay, let me slow down this moment and make a different decision, because I've decided that yelling isn't actually helpful for me, for my relationships, right? And so ultimately, that's the point of doing this. It's sort of like taking stock of where we are, almost doing like a scan, right? Like if you were going to get your car fixed, you wouldn't just bring it to the shop and say, there's something wrong with my car. You would think about, okay, what's actually going on? What's the problem? Oh, I noticed the brakes are kind of squeaking when I step on them. Well, okay, that's a much more helpful piece of information to bring to the mechanic rather than just my car is broken, right? So it's really kind of focusing on like, what's the actual problem? What are my thoughts and feelings? And what can I do about it instead? Questions or thoughts about that?
So we can use mindfulness to realize our feelings. But how can we use mindfulness to react in a more positive way? And you used an example. For example, you just heard something, or you're at work and you read an email that made you upset or something, and you know your first reaction is to go to the email and be like, "Ah," right?
Yep.
You understand what I mean?
Totally understand.
And I think that happens to a lot of us. So how can you use that mindfulness to accomplish your goals without demonstrating, you know, your aggravation or
Yeah. Well, I'm so glad you asked that, because that actually brings me to my next handout.
and Liza, they're asking us if you can email that sheet. So you email it to me, and then when I email the link with the recording, I will put it together.
Great. Wonderful. Yes, thank you for your interest. That sounds great. Okay. So here's a helpful way to kind of frame the question that you just asked. Sometimes it's helpful to think about having 3 states of mind: reasonable mind, emotional mind, and wise mind. And I'll stop sharing so we can kind of have this conversation, but keep this image in your mind. There's kind of the brain, reasonable mind, the heart, emotional mind, and wise mind is sort of a combination of both. So think about the last time, and what you said about getting an email that's upsetting is a perfect example of this. Of when you were in emotional mind, your emotions were kind of steering the ship, right? It's almost like you have no control over your actions because you're just so mad. You're like seeing red, or maybe you're so scared that, you just kind of run away from the situation, right? It's like, if you were in a different state of mind, you might make a different decision. But in this case, your emotions are just sort of in control, right? We like to think about that as emotional mind. Has anyone ever been in emotional mind? I'm gonna raise my hand. It happens, right? Now let's think about the opposite end of that. Yep, I'm seeing some hands raised. Now let's think about kind of the opposite of that, being in reasonable mind, right? Now, for those of us who struggle with our emotions kind of taking over, we think of reasonable mind as a great thing, right? I'm just being so logical. I'm just thinking about consequences. No, I could never respond to that email, because what if I get fired? What if my boss gets mad at me, right? What if I later regret it? Nope, I will not, absolutely not respond. I will just suck it up and deal with it, right? Okay. Sounds kind of good. I don't know. Do you see any problems with reasonable mind?
At least you're not gonna get fired.
Yeah, at least you're probably not going to get
It's an
fired.
advantage to that, but at the same time, I feel that you are not getting rid of those emotions. You're kind of keeping them inside of you when you need to actually release them.
Exactly. It's kind of like, a soda bottle when you shake it. And then eventually, repressing emotions. Exactly. When you have a soda bottle and you're shaking it and then eventually it just explodes, right? That's how we want to think about our emotions. Yep, we can try to just ignore them, not act on them. But eventually, I think we all know this well, and we all know this related to our children, right? Emotions got to come out one way or the other. And so if we ignore our emotions, we're making it worse in the long run. And we're also missing really important information, right? Our emotions communicate really important information to us. Let me ask you this. When you are angry about an email that someone, your boss or your coworker has sent you, what might that be communicating to you? That anger. Oh, looks like you're still on mute.
I'm gonna think, but I also want to hear from other people. I guess how I feel, how it made me feel.
How you feel, feeling disrespected. Yes.
Yeah.
I love that so much. Yes. Right. And it's important to acknowledge that you feel disrespected, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah, the most effective way to handle it might not be to respond really angrily and, tell the person off, right? However, not doing anything ever at work, well, you don't want to feel disrespected at work, right? And so actually that anger is communicating something really, really important. And so that's just one example of why, ignoring emotions is really doing us a disservice, right? In ourselves and our children and our loved ones and our coworkers, right? So that's why, and I'll share my screen again so you can remember the image. That's why really what we aim for is wise mind. Wise mind is kind of somewhat of a middle ground where you keep in mind both the consequences of actions, but also what your emotions are and what they're telling you, right? And you have to keep both in mind in order to make decisions that will be effective and that will be in line with your goals. And I love helping promote this in the children and teens that I work with. And so a lot of times I will just use this language once I've taught it to them, right? If my emotions are really out of control and I yell or I, kind of do something I regret, I'll say, you know what, I'm sorry, I was in emotion mind. My emotions were getting the best of me. I wasn't taking the time to think before I acted, right? Or if I'm being overly sort of reasonable, rational, not taking into mind my emotions or the emotions of a teen or a child, I might say, oh, I'm sorry, you know what? I was being overly reasonable, overly rational. I wasn't keeping in mind my or your emotions. And so instead, I want to kind of keep both in mind. And what's cool about wise mind is that it's going to look different for all of us, right? And I can't tell you, here's what your wise mind would say, right? It's kind of this like inner knowing that comes from listening to your own emotions, thinking about the consequences of a decision you might make, and sort of being in touch with yourself to that place of inner wisdom, the kind of center of your being. I think for those of us who are religious or are more familiar with religious customs, this concept might come a little bit more easily to us. But even if we're not, I think we can still think about it as that place of inner wisdom within us, right? So in this case of getting an email that makes us very upset, angry, frustrated, let's say it's from a boss, what might be a wise mind decision? And I want to hear some different answers here because it's going to be different for all of us. And it's not my place to judge whether it's wise or not, right? So let's get some different ideas for what to do.
So Liza, please repeat your question so that people know and they can write in the chat, please, what the answer is.
Okay, we already got an answer. I love it.
Yeah.
So basically, you get an email from your boss. It makes you really, really upset, frustrated, angry. And what would be a wise mind decision? So sort of not ignoring the anger that you feel, but also thinking about the consequences. What would you do in response to receiving that email that makes you angry? So we already have a couple.
Yeah, so one is to schedule time to meet face to face to discuss further. And the second one, it's kind of similar. Talk to the person.
Yes. Wonderful.
After you have been able to breathe through the anger. I was also going to say, answer your email. Usually this is what I do. I'm going to share. I'm not saying that I'm right, please, at all. I'm just going to share what I do. I just write whatever. I let the email sit there. And then when I'm feeling better, I come back to it and edit the whole thing and tone it down.
Yes.
Before I send it.
I love all of these responses.
And we want more, right? We want more responses. Yeah. Come on, please.
One or two more.
Don't be shy.
Remember, it's different for everyone. Everyone's wise mind might tell them to do something different, and that's fine.
I'm sure that some people like to share as well, like go to somebody and vent and talk about it.
Yep, that's a great one. Go for a walk. Excellent. Yep. Yeah, so it kind of sounds like, a lot of us are saying similar things, which is do something to sort of simmer down, to kind of get into that wise mind place so that our emotions are not controlling us, but also don't ignore, right? And I love this idea of sort of planning a future meeting with your boss or whoever sent the email, or actually responding to the email, right? But after you've had a chance to calm down, because it's not ignoring your own reaction to it. And it's kind of keeping up, maintaining that self-respect while also not acting on impulse to the point where it would create problems for you. So that's a perfect example. And I think, again, as this is a really helpful way to think about mindfulness, because what we just talked about, that whole process, that really, you can only do that if you're focused on the present moment, right? If you're focused on, okay, I'm angry. How do I know I'm angry? What inside my body is telling me that I'm angry, right? It's kind of like that 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 exercise we just did. Well, I feel my heart racing. I feel my palms sweating. I feel like getting really like hot, that kind of flushed face that often happens when we're angry. I am noticing thoughts like, oh, I just want to scream, right? I just want to scream at my boss and tell them what a horrible boss they are, right? Okay, those are my thoughts. Those are my urges. Those are my feelings inside my body. I'm angry. All right, what am I going to do next? That's a perfect example of how to kind of put this all into practice. Any questions or comments about any of this so far? Nope. Okay. Wonderful. So now we've learned about kind of what mindfulness is, why it helps us have more control over our own feelings and actions, why it improves relationships, right? Think about how, even just the idea of being present. I'm sure that many of us can relate to this with our children in particular, right? think about if you're trying to have a conversation with someone and they're on their cell phone playing games, right? And they're clearly not present with us in the conversation. How does that impact the relationship? Probably makes us kind of feel disrespected, right? Feel like what we're saying isn't important, feel like they're not listening to us. So really being present in a discussion, making eye contact, even observing and describing what the other person is saying, what their body language is like. That's a way to practice mindfulness to improve relationships. We also talked about, reducing suffering and increasing kind of pleasurable experiences with the world. So now I'm going to share my screen and we are going to talk through kind of what the skills are. So sort of when you want to get more in touch with the present moment, what do you actually do? We've already gone over this a little bit, but we'll review. And then we are going to talk about sort of how to be mindful and what that looks like in practice. Okay. These are the mindfulness what skills. So what does it take to kind of increase your interaction with the present moment as opposed to being stuck in the past or stuck in the future? So we sort of did this with the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 exercise, right? We observed, not putting a label on it first, right? Just so that we make sure we're kind of observing the right thing, right? Kind of wordless watching, noticing the experience in the present moment, watching our thoughts and feelings come and go as if they were on a conveyor belt, right? So that can be really, really helpful rather than kind of getting caught up with every thought, like, oh, is the thing that I said to that person, do they hate me? Why did I say that? What's wrong with me? I'm such a jerk, right? Instead, noticing the thought, I'm noticing that I wish I hadn't said that yesterday. I'm noticing that it's making me wonder if they don't like me. Okay, let me notice that thought and let it pass by and wait for the next thought to come in, right? Let's see what else here. So make sure to note that we cannot observe another person's inner experience, right? So you can never know for sure that someone's upset. It's more, I observe a tear rolling down their cheek, right? Or I notice the thought that that person might be upset. And then another mindfulness skill is to describe, right? So we take what we've observed and we put words on it. My face feels hot. I feel my heart racing, right? I'm having the thought that I upset this person. I'm having an urge to yell at my boss, yell at my child, right? And a really important part of being mindful is that we're not judging ourselves, right? We're just sort of noticing what it is. Okay? Not, I'm the worst person ever. I can't believe I'm doing this. Nope. I observe the thought. I wish I hadn't said that yesterday, right? Okay. Here's a really fun one. So this is my favorite mindfulness skill. It's to participate. Okay. So when we were doing the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 exercise, hopefully we were all participating fully in the experience. Meaning we were not checking our email, responding to text messages, cooking, making lunch, right? Thinking about what we were going to have for lunch. Hopefully we were in the moment, listening and fully throwing ourselves into the experience. And honestly, that's the best way to be mindful. I got someone saying guilty. Yep. We all do it, right? We live in a world where it's really...
That's what it is.
Multitasking. Yep. We live in a world where it's really tempting and easy to multitask, right? Especially as parents, especially as, right, just people in this world. And, but the problem is that we really aren't being mindful and we're not getting all the benefits of being mindful that I talked about if we're not fully throwing ourselves into the moment. So what I want you to do right now is think about an activity in your life where it's really easy to fully participate. So for me, when I go swimming, It's really easy for me to not be thinking about anything else and just to be fully present because the water is, kind of overtaking my experience and I'm just fully in it. So I want you all to take a few minutes to think, and ideally write in the chat about an activity where it just kind of comes naturally. You're fully in it, you're fully participating, not thinking about or doing anything else. Working out. Yep, I hear that one a lot. Yoga. Oh, these are great. What else? Watching a movie. Excellent. Driving. Oh, I'm glad to hear that one. I feel like a lot of people don't fully participate when they're driving, and that's a problem, right? So that's great. That increases safety as well. What else? Think about for children, what they might say. I hear riding a roller coaster. Spending time with my son. Wow, that's lovely to hear. Playing a musical instrument, piano. Wow. Playing the piano seems, I wish I could play the piano. It seems like it would be a very mindful activity because you have to really work hard, right? And so you're probably not thinking about anything else because it requires a lot of your brain too, right? Gardening. Yep, that's a lovely one. I hear. I know a lot of people take up gardening in order to practice mindfulness, right? Because there's so many smells and colors, and it very much requires all of your five senses. Yeah. And, for the person who wrote when I'm spending time with my son, that's really beautiful. And I know that that's the goal for a lot of people who are, taking this type of workshop or who are thinking about how to use these skills. It's kind of how to participate more when we're with the people that we care about the most, right? Because that improves relationships. And I think that this is one where I think that this could be really helpful to bring back to your children, just to kind of point out, right? Just highlight, wow, it feels like we're both really in this moment, right? Or you're helping me cook dinner, right? And I notice you are really participating. You're not doing anything else. You're not also texting and playing video games, right? You're here. You're fully participating. What's that like for you, right? What do you notice? What smells do you notice? What tastes do you notice? What do you see, right? This is sort of how we can train some of these skills in our children. Wow, we just got the comment. It's very hard to do, but we block off time for mommy and me activities during the week or on the weekend. That's so nice to hear. I'm sure it's very hard to do, right? None of this is easy. And that's kind of exactly what we're talking about, right? Kind of blocking off some of that time for activities, but also really participating, only doing one thing at a time while you're doing those activities, right? Which again, in the world we live in, with all of our busy lives, can be very hard to do. Any other questions or comments about that? Okay. So finally, I've sort of been talking about how to help our children, how to train these skills in ourselves and in our children. And again, if you're just sort of doing this at home, really pointing out your own process, I think is a really helpful place to start. So even if you're cooking dinner, right? I notice that this smells really delicious or sweet, right? And smelling it is making me feel more in this moment, and it's making me worry less about, you know, the thing I have to do tomorrow, or be upset about the thing that happened today. So just to kind of like say some of these things out loud, right? And now I'm going to talk about sort of how we practice mindfulness in some additional ways. Do we have time for that? Just like about 10 more minutes?
We have, yeah, absolutely. And we have one more comment. Maria is asking, is it easier for women to be mindful than for men?
Interesting. Is there anything? I wonder what made you have that question, or sort of what you think about why women might have an easier time being mindful. Is there any additional information you can give? You're taking some time to type. I'll take a sip of water in the meantime.
So Maria, is what prompted you to ask this question? Basically, well, Liza wants to know to get to the answer, right?
Yeah, exactly. Do you want to read?
Because women can do more things in one time. I agree with that.
I love that. Yeah, but you know, in a way, that might mean that you need to practice this even more, right? Because I think that doing so much at once can make it hard to be mindful, right? If you're always running around doing 50 things at once, it's hard to really like use your 5 senses, sight, smell, taste, touch, and hearing on one thing, right? So in some ways that might actually, while it might be true, right, it can also make things a little bit harder sometimes. I love that question.
You were gonna do an exercise, Liza.
What's that?
That you were gonna do a final exercise?
Oh yeah, so I was going to talk just really quickly about you know, sort of how to be mindful. And you know what, I actually don't even need to share my screen, because it's kind of what we were just talking about. And yeah, it's basically doing one thing at a time, right? That if we want to really practice mindfulness, it's sometimes we like to call this skill being one mindful. So only doing one thing at a time. And the reason is that a lot of times we think as human beings that we can multitask, right? Oh, I'll be fine. I'll just, you know, cook dinner while, you know, having this important conversation with my child, right? Or I will drive while, I don't know, something, responding to someone, right? And actually, we know from some scientists doing work on this that we kind of can't. Our brains really do function the best when we only focus on one thing at a time. And that's the way we sort of get the most out of these skills, is really by slowing down. So I'll kind of end with this. When you're walking, walk. When you're talking, talk. When you're eating, eat. When you're texting, text. And when you're having a discussion, an important discussion, have the important discussion and don't do anything else. So that's kind of the way to remember it, to practice being one mindful, to practice using these skills and just doing one thing at a time.
Hard to do.
Hard to do.
Hard to do. Well, we can start trying.
Yeah, and I mean, look, you know, maybe I'll leave you with this. And this I'm borrowing this from someone who has written a lot about kind of the practice of mindfulness in our society. This person's name is Jon Kabat-Zinn. I don't know if any of you have heard of him. It goes back to what I was saying at the very beginning about being in the shower, but having your mind be somewhere else. So what he likes to say, when you're in the shower, be in the shower. And so maybe that's what I'll leave you all with. When you're in the shower and your mind starts wandering, just notice it's wandering, right? It's going to wander again. That's okay, right? It's very, very difficult to be present 100% of the time. It's really not possible. Even people whose like entire jobs it is to practice mindfulness, they're not mindful 100% of the time, right? So really the practice of it, it's why it's called a practice. The practice of it is just noticing when you're not present, right? Noticing, all right, I'm in the shower, my mind is wandering. Hold on, I'm in the shower. Let me bring it back to being in the shower. Let me smell the soap. Let me feel the water on my back. Oh, my mind is wandering again to that meeting. Okay, let me notice again that I'm in the shower. When I'm in the shower, ask myself, am I in the shower, right? And that's the practice. And if you start to incorporate something like this, even just once a day, even just when you're in the shower, right? Using your 5 senses to try to be in the shower, that can be a start. Oh, and thank you for the comments. I appreciate it. All right, any final questions or thoughts?
I personally feel I have a lot of work to do. So thank you, Liza, for bringing that to my attention.
Of course.
And it's what you said, obviously we are attending this talk and we're learning to ourselves, but it's something that we definitely need to teach our children and adolescents. I feel that in the world that we are living right now, where everything happens so fast and there are so many expectations of us, especially as women, now that somebody put the topic that,
Yeah.
we have to be workers, mothers, wives, we have to take care of the house. It's so much.
Yeah.
It's hard to find me time, and the same way that it's hard to find me time, it's hard to focus on one thing because you have a million other things waiting for you.
Yep.
So, but I guess if we start one at a time, this is something I learned long time ago, is that, we don't need to change the world. As long as one person changes at a time, we're changing the world for that person, right? So I think that that's a good thing to have into consideration. And hey, why not starting by ourselves, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah, so this is incredibly helpful. We'll have you here again because we need to practice more and more of these. And then next week, don't forget that this month is recovery month as well. So we're going to be talking about how addictions not only affect the individual, but it affects the family, their friends, their society, and how to help those that we love find the path to recovery. So this is going to be a very interesting talk as well. And with that, we are going to close our September month, and I'm going to be sending the calendar for our talks for October. So don't miss those. Liza, thank you so much. This was very mindful.
Thank you so much for having me, and thank you everyone for your attention.
Yes, and I'm sure people are going to be commenting about this a lot. So we are going to bring you back.
Wonderful.
Mind.
Of course.
And we just want to be, learning about all of these skills that we also need. And again, thanks for very helpful, very insightful. People are definitely happy with what you told us today. So thank you very much to all, and I will see you next week.
Thank you.
Take care.